He said it with a smirk, acting like he was delivering a punchline at my expense. 40 minutes later, I stood before the very people who had been laughing behind my back, holding an envelope I was not supposed to open unless my life depended on it. My husband did not know the apology he demanded was the exact moment I had been waiting for. If they wanted a public performance, I was about to give them one they would never recover from. My name is Emily Ross. I am 33 years old. And until tonight, I was the woman who kept the peace. I was the one who smoothed over the awkward silences, the one who remembered the birthdays, the one who absorbed the subtle insults like a sponge so that the dinner party would not be ruined. I was competent, reliable, and utterly exhausted. Standing here in the manicured living room of a sprawling estate in Raleigh, North Carolina, I felt a familiar fatigue settling into my bones. It was not just the physical tiredness of a long work week at the design studio. It was the spiritual exhaustion of being minimized for sport. The room smelled of expensive cologne and roasted duck. Crystal flutes clinked with a sound that was supposed to be festive, but sounded brittle to my ears. Around me, the social elite of Raleigh were performing their favorite play, Everything is Perfect, and we are all impossibly happy. Men in tailored blazers laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Women in silk and velvet leaned in close, whispering secrets that were actually just judgments dressed up as concern. It was a Shark Tank where everyone pretended to be a dolphin. I was holding a glass of sparkling water, watching the condensation slide down the side, wishing I were anywhere else. I wished I were back in my small office, or even sitting in traffic on the Beltline. Anywhere but here, standing next to my husband. Evan Ross was charming. That was the first thing everyone noticed about him. He had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. At least until he needed something from someone else. Tonight, however, the charm was thin. It was stretched tight over something frantic. He had been checking his watch every 10 minutes since we arrived. He had been downing his scotch faster than usual. He leaned in close to me, his breath warm against my ear. From a distance, it must have looked romantic. A loving husband sharing a private moment with his wife amidst the chaos of the party. "Apologize to Brielle," he whispered. I turned to look at him, confused. "What?" He did not blink. His eyes were hard, devoid of the warmth he usually faked so well in public. "Apologize to Brielle," he repeated, his voice dropping an octave, razor sharp and cold. "Or I am filing for divorce." The words landed like stones in deep water. Heavy, final. I froze. It was not fear that paralyzed me. That was the strange part. If he had said this 6 months ago, or even 6 weeks ago, I might have panicked. I might have grabbed his arm, begged him to explain, asked what I had done wrong. I might have cried. I was good at crying in private, hiding my tears in the shower so I could emerge with a fresh face to support him. But I did not feel fear. I felt a sudden, chilling clarity. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He was not angry. Evan was a man who enjoyed anger. He liked the rush of righteousness. When he was truly mad, his face flushed, his veins popped, and he became loud. But tonight, he was pale. There was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip that the dim lighting could not hide. His hand, the one gripping his glass, was trembling ever so slightly. He was not angry. He was terrified, and he was rehearsed. The cadence of the sentence, the dramatic pause, the ultimatum. It was a line he had practiced in the mirror. It was a script. He was delivering a line because he needed a specific reaction from me. He needed me to crumble. He needed me to be the weeping, apologetic wife who would do anything to save her marriage. I shifted my gaze across the room to Brielle Garner. She was holding court near the fireplace, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. She looked tragic, beautifully, calculatedly tragic. She was dabbing at the corner of her eye with a cocktail napkin, surrounded by a small circle of sympathetic listeners. She was telling the story again, the story of how I had supposedly humiliated her at the charity gala last week. It was a lie. Of course, a complete fabrication. I had barely spoken to her at the gala, but facts did not matter in Brielle's world. Only the narrative mattered. Standing just outside her circle was her husband, Miles Garner. Miles was different from Evan. Evan was loud and flashy. Miles was quiet and dangerous. He was watching us. He was not looking at his weeping wife. He was looking directly at Evan. His expression was unreadable, flat and cold, like a reptile sunning itself on a rock. He took a slow sip of his drink. His eyes locked on my husband. It hit me then, with the force of a physical blow. This was a setup. The three of them, Evan, Brielle, Miles, were locked in a dance I was never meant to see. Evan's desperation, Brielle's performance, Miles's supervision, it was all connected. Evan was not threatening divorce because he wanted to leave me. He was threatening divorce because he needed me to apologize. The apology was not about feelings. It was a key. It was a transaction. If I apologized, I admitted guilt. If I admitted guilt, I established a pattern of behavior. I became the unstable one, the reckless one, the one who could not be trusted. Why did they need that? My hand drifted instinctively to my purse. It was a sensible black leather tote, hanging heavy on my shoulder. Inside, buried beneath my wallet and my keys, was a thick, manila envelope. I could feel the weight of it through the leather. I had received it 3 days ago from a man named Noah Whitaker. I had met him in a diner, a place with sticky floors and burnt coffee, far away from the country clubs and high-end steakhouses Evan preferred. Noah was a lawyer, but not the kind Evan golfed with. Noah looked tired. He looked like a man who had seen too much. He had slid the envelope across the table to me. It was sealed with heavy tape. On the front, in handwriting that belonged to a dead woman named Tessa Vale, were the words, "Open only if they force your hand." "Do not open it yet, Emily." Noah had warned me, his voice gravelly. "If you open it, you cannot unsee it, and once you see it, you have to act. Keep it sealed. Wait for them to make a move. If they are who I think they are, they will get sloppy. They will get greedy. Wait until they force you." I had thought he was being dramatic. I had taken the envelope home and hidden it, thinking I would probably shred it in a week. But now, standing in this room with the air conditioning humming too loudly and my husband's threat hanging in the air, I knew they had just forced my hand. Evan was staring at me, waiting for the collapse. He expected the Emily of yesterday, the Emily who smoothed things over. He expected me to lower my eyes, to whisper a terrified, "I am sorry," to rush over to Brielle and beg for her forgiveness to save my marriage. He needed that public display. He needed witnesses. A strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of a soldier who realizes the ambush has already happened, and the only way out is through. If I refused, he would file for divorce. He would control the narrative. He would paint me as the stubborn, bitter wife who refused to make amends. He would win the crowd. If I apologized, I gave him exactly what he wanted. Or did I? I looked at Evan. I saw the weakness in his jawline. I saw the fear in his eyes. He thought he was the predator here, but he was just the bait. Miles was the hunter, and Brielle was the distraction. "Okay," I said. My voice was soft, obedient. It was the voice of the wife he thought he had. Evan blinked. He seemed surprised it was this easy. The tension in his shoulders dropped by 10%. He let out a breath he had been holding. A smirk touched the corner of his lips. That patronizing, arrogant smirk that said, "I own you." "Good," he said, straightening his jacket. "Go do it, now." "I will," I whispered. I gripped my purse tighter. I could feel the sharp corner of the envelope pressing against my hip. I knew what I had to do. I could not just walk away. Walking away would leave questions. Walking away would let them spin the story after I left. No, they wanted a show. They wanted a public declaration. They wanted everyone in this room, all 30 or 40 of Raleigh's most influential gossips, to stop and listen. I would give them that. I took a step toward Brielle, and then another. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. The sound was rhythmic, steady. I was not shaking. Evan followed a step behind me, like a handler walking a prize dog. He wanted to be close enough to hear the apology, to bask in his victory. He wanted to see Brielle's face light up with triumph. I approached the fireplace. Brielle saw me coming. She paused in the middle of her sentence, letting a hush fall over her circle. She tilted her head, giving me a look of pity that was so condescending I almost laughed. Miles shifted his position. Turning his body fully toward us, he crossed his arms. He was ready to witness the submission. The room grew quiet. People sensed the drama. It is a biological instinct. Humans can smell conflict like blood in the water. Conversations trailed off. Heads turned. The clinking of silverware stopped. I stood before Brielle. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the makeup and the expensive jewelry, she looked hungry. She wanted this humiliation. She needed it to feed something dark inside her. "Brielle," I said. My voice was clear. It carried across the room. She offered a tight, benevolent smile. "Emily, I did not expect to see you come over here." "Evan told me I had to," I said, keeping my tone flat. "He said if I did not come over here and address this, he would file for divorce." A ripple of shock went through the room. That was not part of the script. I was supposed to just apologize, not reveal the coercion. Evan stiffened beside me. "Emily," he warned, his voice low. I ignored him. I turned to face the room. I saw the faces of our neighbors, our colleagues, the people who we spent our weekends with. They were wide-eyed, hungry for the scandal. I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed the cool paper of the envelope. I did not pull it out yet. Not yet. First, I had to set the stage. I had to make sure the trap was fully sprung. "I know we are all friends here," I said, raising my voice just enough to command the entire space. "And I know there has been some tension. Evan feels very strongly that I owe Brielle an apology. He feels that my behavior has been unacceptable." Brielle nodded, her eyes gleaming. "It takes a big person to admit that, Emily." "It does," I agreed. "It takes a very big person to admit the truth." I looked at Miles. He was not smiling. His eyes were narrowed. He knew. He realized a second too late that the tone was wrong. This was not a surrender. But Evan? Evan was still clueless. He was so relieved that I was speaking, so relieved that I was playing along, that he missed the edge in my voice. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully bullied me into compliance to cover whatever tracks they were trying to hide. I took a breath. The air in the room felt electric. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the late nights I worked to pay for the lifestyle Evan demanded. I thought about the way he corrected my grammar in front of his friends. I thought about the credit notification I had received a month ago, the one that started this whole nightmare. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just Emily Ross, the quiet interior designer who wanted everyone to get along. They thought they could use my name, my credit, and my life as collateral for their schemes, and then bully me into silence when things got complicated. They were wrong. I looked at Evan one last time. He was almost preening. He was about to get his way. "So," I said, and I let my hand close firmly around the envelope inside my bag. "I want to apologize. But since we are doing honesty in public, I think we should be entirely honest." I paused. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. I had walked into this party as a victim. I had walked in as a wife on the brink of being discarded. But as I looked at their smug, expectant faces, I realized I was not the one in danger. They thought they were about to ruin me. But they were about to confess, without realizing it, to understand why I stood in that living room holding a grenade in the form of a legal envelope. You have to go back exactly 30 days. The collapse of my life did not begin with a scream. It began with the hum of a commercial refrigerator and the smell of stale coffee in an empty office. It was a Tuesday night at Crescent and Finch Design Studio. The rest of the team had clocked out at 5:30. leaving the open concept workspace in a kind of eerie, suspended animation. I was the senior lead on the Peterson account, which meant I was the one staying late to obsess over the texture of the drapes and the exact shade of slate gray for the kitchen island. My eyes burned. The digital clock on my monitor read 8:14 in the evening. I was finalizing a render when my cell phone vibrated against the desk surface. The sound was harsh in the quiet room. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number with a local area code. Usually, I would let that go to voicemail, assuming it was a telemarketer or a political campaign, but my contractor was supposed to call me back about a supply chain issue with the lumber. I picked it up. "This is Emily," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose to ward off a headache. "Ms. Emily Ross." The voice on the other end was male, professional, and entirely humorless. It sounded like the voice of a man who spent his life staring at spreadsheets. "Yes, speaking. This is David Thorne from the Compliance Division at Sovereign Regional Bank. I am calling to verify some activity regarding the commercial loan application submitted under your profile yesterday." I paused, my hand hovering over my mouse. I actually laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "I am sorry. You have the wrong person. I did not apply for a commercial loan. My husband and I have a mortgage, but we are certainly not looking for new debt right now." I waited for the apology. I waited for him to say he had misdialed, or that their system had made an error. "Ms. Ross," he said, and his tone did not shift. It remained flat, terrifyingly neutral. "The application was submitted electronically with your primary credentials. It is for a secured line of credit for a business entity. To ensure we are speaking to the right account holder, can you please verify the last 4 digits of your social security number?" "I am not giving you my social over the phone," I said, my defenses going up. "I just told you, I did not apply for anything. This is clearly a scam or a mistake. If this is a case of identity theft, we need to flag it immediately," he said. He did not sound like a scammer. Scammers were usually urgent, pushing you to act fast. This man sounded bored, like he was following a flowchart. "I have the number on file here. I will read the last 4 digits to you. You just tell me if I'm correct. 4029. The air left my lungs. 4029. Those were my numbers. "Ms. Ross." "Yes," I whispered. My throat felt suddenly tight, like I had swallowed a handful of sand. "That is correct." "Okay. And are you listed as a managing partner for Harborline Ventures, LLC? Harborline what?" I asked. I grabbed a pen, scrambling to write the name down on the back of a fabric swatch. "I have never heard of that company. I am an interior designer. I work for Crescent and Finch. I do not own a business." "I see." The typing sound on his end was loud, rhythmic, and aggressive. "We have a loan application here for $250,000, secured against personal assets, listing you as the primary guarantor for Harborline Ventures, LLC. Since you are stating this is fraudulent, I am placing a hold on the application pending an internal review. You should check your credit report immediately. Ms. Ross." "Wait," I said, my voice rising. "Who submitted it? Was it done online? Do you have an IP address?" "I cannot share those details at this stage. Check your credit. Good night." The line went dead. I sat there in the empty office, the silence pressing in on me. The comfortable, mundane stress of choosing curtain fabrics had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sliding sensation in my gut. Harborline Ventures. The name meant nothing to me. It sounded generic, like a shell company in a movie. I packed up my things with trembling hands. I drove home on autopilot, the highway lights blurring into streaks of red and white. When I walked into our house, the television was on. Evan was asleep on the sofa, his mouth slightly open, a half-empty glass of red wine on the coffee table. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man with nothing to hide. I did not wake him. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and logged into the credit monitoring site I had not checked in 6 months. The wheel spun for 5 seconds. It felt like 5 hours. When the dashboard loaded, I scanned the alert section. There it was. A notification from 48 hours ago. New inquiry Sovereign Regional Bank. New Association Harborline Ventures, LLC. It was real. Someone was using my name, my history, and my credit to build a financial structure I knew nothing about. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. I felt violated. It was a physical sensation, like someone had broken into my house and rearranged the furniture while I slept. The next morning, the sun came up too bright and too early. I had slept for maybe 2 hours, tossing and turning, my mind racing through scenarios. Was it a hacker? A data breach at the hospital or the DMV? I went down to the kitchen. Evan was already there, brewing espresso. He was wearing his navy suit, looking crisp and handsome. He hummed a tune as he frothed the milk. "Morning, sunshine," he said, turning to give me a quick peck on the cheek. He smelled of shaving cream and coffee. "You were tossing around a lot last night. Bad dreams." I stood by the island, wrapping my hands around a ceramic mug for warmth. I needed to be rational. Evan was in finance. He understood these things. He would know what to do. "Evan," I said, keeping my voice steady, "something weird happened yesterday. I got a call from a bank. Someone tried to take out a $250,000 loan in my name." Evan paused. He set the milk pitcher down. He looked at me, his eyebrows knitting together in concern. "What, are you serious?" "Yes. They had my social. They had my info. They linked me to some company called Harborline Ventures. Have you ever heard of it?" I watched his face closely. I was not suspicious of him yet, not really, but I was desperate for a reaction that made sense. Evan frowned, thinking. Then he shook his head. "Harborline, no. Never heard of it. That is terrifying. Did you freeze your credit?" "I am going to do it this morning, but Evan, it was so specific. They said I was a managing partner." Evan let out a short chuckle, shaking his head as he picked up his espresso. He walked over to me and placed his hands on my shoulders, looking down at me with that indulgent, calming expression he used when I worried about my mother's health or the leaking roof. "Babe," he said softly, "listen to me. It is probably a mix-up. You know how these databases get crossed. Some algorithm matched your social with some other Emily Ross, and the wires got crossed. It happens all the time. My firm deals with this stuff constantly. It did not feel like a mix-up," I argued, feeling small under his hands. The guy read my social security number to me. "So my social is probably on the dark web 5 times over. Yours too. It is the world we live in." He kissed my forehead, a lingering, patronizing pressure. "Freeze the credit, dispute the inquiry. I will have the guys at my office look into it if it makes you feel better, but do not let it ruin your day. Okay, you have that big presentation with the architects." He dismissed it. Just like that. $250,000 of potential fraud, and he brushed it off like I had found a spider in the bathtub. "Okay," I said, because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe it was just a glitch in the matrix. But as he walked out the door, whistling that same tune, the knot in my stomach tightened. I did not go to work. I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Instead, I drove downtown to the County Register of Deeds. The building was old, smelling of floor wax and dust. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency. I pulled a ticket and waited for 40 minutes until a woman with heavy glasses and a skeptical expression called my number. "I need to check if there are any recent filings under my name," I said, handing her my ID. "Or under a company called Harborline Ventures." She typed slowly, her acrylic nails clicking against the keys. She squinted at the screen, then she stopped typing. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "You are Emily Ross?" she asked. "Yes." "And you reside at 42 Oakwood Drive?" "Yes." "I have a filing here from last week," she said, her voice dropping to a bureaucratic monotone. "A notice of commencement for property improvement, listing Harborline Ventures as the contractor and you as the guarantor. It is cross-referenced with a lien waiver." The room seemed to tilt. A lien waiver. On my house. It appears so. It was filed electronically. Can I see it? She printed a document. It was 3 pages. I flipped to the last page. There, at the bottom, was a signature. Emily Ross. It was not my signature. It was a good copy. Close enough to pass a casual glance, but the loop on the R was too wide, and the slant was slightly off. But it was notarized. There was a stamp. Tessa Vale, Notary Public. I stared at the signature until the black ink seemed to swim before my eyes. This was not a database error. This was not a mix-up on the dark web. Someone had forged my name on a legal document connecting a shell company to the home I lived in with my husband. Who filed this? I asked, my voice trembling. I cannot give you legal advice, ma'am, the clerk said, her face softening slightly. But it was submitted by a courier service. If you say this is not your signature, you need a lawyer, today. I walked out of the building into the bright, blinding sunshine of downtown Raleigh. I felt sick, physically nauseous. The world looked the same, people walking dogs. Cars stopping at red lights, but the ground beneath me had dissolved. I sat in my car for an hour, just breathing. I needed to tell Evan. I needed to show him the paper. He would be furious. He would call the police. He would fix this. I drove home, the document burning a hole in my passenger seat. When I pulled into the driveway, Evan's car was already there. It was only 4 o'clock. He was never home this early. I walked inside, clutching my purse, the document folded and hidden inside my jacket pocket. Evan was in the kitchen again. He had opened a bottle of wine, an expensive Cabernet we had been saving for an anniversary. He was pouring 2 large glasses. He looked up as I entered, and his face broke into a wide, dazzling smile. It was too bright. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, coming around the counter to hand me a glass. "You are home early." "Me too. I thought we deserved a little celebration." "Celebration?" I asked, taking the glass automatically. My hand felt cold against the stem. "For what?" "For life," he said vaguely, clinking his glass against mine. "And I took care of that credit thing you were worried about. I made some calls. It is all handled. Just a clerical error. Like I said." My heart stopped. "You handled it?" "Yep, gone. Do not worry about it." He took a long sip of wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. "Listen, I was thinking. We have been working too hard. We are disconnected. I called Miles and Brielle. They are free tonight. I thought we could do a double date. That new Italian place downtown. My treat." I stared at him. He had just lied to me. I knew he had lied, because I had the document in my pocket. You do not fix a notarized forgery with a phone call. And then, the timing hit me. I discover the fraud. I ask questions. He dismisses it. I go to the records office, and suddenly, he is home early, pouring wine, telling me it is handled, and pushing for a dinner with his best friend and his best friend's wife. Why Miles? Why Brielle? Miles was a corporate liability attorney. Brielle was a socialite with a history of failing upward. Evan was watching me, waiting for an answer. His smile was fixed, rigid. He was checking to see if I bought it. He was checking to see if the Emily who keeps the peace was still in charge. If I said no, he would push. If I showed him the document now, he would have an explanation ready. He would spin it. I realized then that I was not looking at my husband. I was looking at a stranger who was wearing my husband's face. "That sounds lovely," I said. The lie tasted like copper in my mouth. "I would love to see Miles and Brielle." Evan exhaled. His shoulders dropped. "Great. Go get changed. Wear something nice. Let's show them how good we are." I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling heavy as lead. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet so he would not hear me. I pulled the document out of my pocket and looked at the forged signature one more time. Then I looked at the mirror, the call from the bank, the forged signature, the lien on the house, Evan's lie, the sudden dinner with the Garners. It was all one thing. It was a web, and I was the fly they were waiting to wrap up. I did not know the full picture yet. I did not know why they needed me, or what Harborline Ventures really was. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty as I stared at my reflection. The man downstairs was not protecting me. He was positioning me. I began to unbutton my shirt, preparing to dress for a dinner where I would have to smile at the people who were dismantling my life. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just felt a cold, hard knot of dread turning into something else. Calculated, quiet fury. The phone call that changed my trajectory from victim to strategist did not come from a bank. It came 2 days after that suffocating double date with the Garners. On a Thursday afternoon while I was sitting in my car eating a cold sandwich, the caller ID displayed a name I did not recognize: Noah Whitaker, attorney at law. I almost did not answer. Since the call from the bank and my visit to the Register of Deeds, I had become paranoid about my phone. Every ring felt like another sinkhole opening up beneath my feet. But curiosity, or perhaps a survival instinct, made me slide the answer button. 40 minutes later, I walked into a diner called the Red Booth on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place Evan would never set foot in: vinyl seats, patched with duct tape, the smell of frying onions heavy in the air, and a waitress who called everyone honey without smiling. Noah Whitaker was sitting in the back corner. He was nothing like the polished, shark-like attorneys Evan kept on retainer. Noah looked like a man who was tired of the law. He wore a gray suit that was slightly too large for him, and his briefcase was scuffed leather that had seen decades of use. He had a cup of black coffee in front of him, and nothing else. "Mrs. Ross?" he asked as I approached. He did not stand up, but he gestured to the empty seat opposite him. "Thank you for coming." "You said it was urgent," I said, sliding into the booth. "And you said it was about Tessa Vale. I know that name, but I cannot place it." "She was a notary public," Noah said. His voice was gravelly, low enough that the truck drivers at the counter could not hear us. "She handled the closing on your house 5 years ago. She also handled several business filings for your husband's firm over the last decade." The memory clicked. I remembered a small, bird-like woman with sharp eyes and trembling hands who had stamped our mortgage papers. "I remember her. Is she in trouble? Is that why my signature was forged?" Noah took a slow sip of his coffee. He looked at me with an expression that was halfway between pity and professional detachment. "Tessa passed away 6 months ago. Mrs. Ross." I blinked. "Oh, I am sorry. Then I do not understand why we are here." "Tessa was my client," Noah explained. "She was an old-school woman. She believed in the sanctity of the seal, toward the end of her life. She started noticing things, discrepancies, documents that came across her desk that did not feel right, names appearing where they should not be. She kept detailed journals. She was worried that her stamp was being used to facilitate something illegal, but she did not have enough proof to go to the police without violating client privilege." He reached down and lifted the heavy briefcase onto the table. The latch clicked loudly in the quiet diner. "Before she died, she gave me specific instructions." Noah continued. "She set up a trigger. If certain names appeared in public filings, specifically the name Harborline Ventures, linked to your name, I was to contact you and deliver this." He pulled out a thick, manila envelope. It was not sealed. It was bulging with papers. "This is not a legal filing. Mrs. Ross, this is a dead woman's conscience." I stared at the envelope. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that contrasted with the stillness of the diner. I reached out and took it. It felt heavy, like a brick. "What is in here?" I asked. "Proof," Noah said. "Go ahead. Look." I opened the flap and slid the stack of papers onto the sticky table. The top document was a photocopy of an operating agreement for Harborline Ventures, LLC. The date on it was from 2 years ago. I scanned the page, my eyes searching for the familiar, and then I found it. Managing member Evan Ross. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. I expected that. I knew Evan was involved. I had seen the lien on our house, but Noah pointed a thick finger at the bottom of the page. "Keep reading," he said. "Look at the officers." I followed his finger. Secretary Miles Garner. And the beneficiary, Noah said. Look at the beneficiary clause for the shell company. My eyes drifted to the paragraph below. Beneficiary of interest, Brielle Garner. The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. The noise of the diner, the clattering plates, the sizzling grill faded into a dull hum. Brielle, my best friend, the woman I had cried with over coffee, the woman who had held my hand when I had a miscarriage 3 years ago, the woman who sat across from me at dinner 2 nights ago and complained about her Pilates instructor while I was terrified about identity theft. She was not just a bystander, she was a beneficiary. This does not make sense, I whispered. I felt a desperate need to find a logical explanation. Something that did not involve my entire life being a lie. Maybe they put her name down for tax reasons. Maybe she does not know Evan manages money for people. Maybe he just set this up for them and used my name as a placeholder because he needed a spouse's credit history for the initial rating. He cuts corners. I know that. But he would not. I trailed off. I could not finish the sentence because even I did not believe it. Noah sat back, crossing his arms over his chest. He did not coddle me. Mrs. Ross, look at the dates. This company was formed 2 years ago. The loan application using your stolen identity was filed last week. But look at this. He pulled a separate sheet from the stack. It was a timeline, handwritten in shaky cursive Tessa's handwriting. August. 2 years ago, Evan Ross requests notary for Harbor Line. No spouse present. Request denied. September. 2 years ago, Miles Garner requests notary for same document. Denied. They tried to get this validated legally, Noah said. Tessa refused them because you were not there to sign, so they waited. They waited until she retired, and then they found a way to bypass the requirement. But Tessa kept copies of the drafts they sent her. He tapped the paper with Brielle's name on it. This is not a tax loophole. This is a structure designed to siphon assets. Specifically, marital assets. They are leveraging your credit and your property to fund a venture where the profit goes to Harbor Line, meaning Evan and the Garners, and the liability stays with you. I felt cold, bone-deep cold. Why? I asked. Evan makes good money. Miles is a partner at his firm. Why would they do this for $250,000? It is a lot of money, but it is not worth prison. It is not just $250,000, Noah said softly. Turn the page. I turned the page. It was a ledger of intended loans, a projection. The $250,000 was just the first tranche. The plan outlined a series of acquisitions and loans totaling nearly $4 million, all secured against assets that legally belonged to me or to our joint marital estate, but funneled into this entity where I had zero ownership. If the business failed, I would be bankrupt. If it succeeded, they would be rich, and I would be none the wiser. And Brielle? Brielle was listed as the beneficiary. That meant if Evan and I divorced, and he had to split his assets with me, Harbor Line would technically belong to her. Keeping the money out of my reach, it was not just fraud, it was a divorce strategy. I looked up at Noah. My vision was blurry, but I was not crying. The tears would not come. I was past that point. I was in a place of shock so profound it felt like clarity. He is planning to leave me, I said. It was a statement, not a question. Or he is planning to make you so financially toxic that you cannot afford to leave him, Noah corrected. Control is usually the goal with men like this. If you are drowning in debt that he controls, you do not walk away. I looked at the pile of papers. It was a dissection of my marriage. Every page was a knife in my back. What do I do? I asked. Do I go to the police? Noah leaned forward. You could, but white-collar crime investigations take months, sometimes years. And right now, on paper, it looks like you signed those documents. They have a notary stamp likely forged or bought on the recent filings. If you blow this up now, they will claim you are a confused wife who forgot what she signed. They will gaslight you. Evan will say you are having a breakdown. Miles is a lawyer. He will bury you in motions until you run out of money. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a smaller, sealed packet. It was wrapped in thick brown paper and taped shut with heavy security tape. Tessa left this for the end, Noah said, placing it on top of the other documents. She called it the insurance policy. I do not know the exact contents, but she told me that if you are ever cornered, if they ever try to destroy your credibility publicly, this is what you use. I stared at the sealed packet. It was small, innocent-looking. Open only if you are cornered. I read the note scrawled on the front. Do not open it yet, Noah warned. Information is leverage. If you open it now, you might be tempted to use it too early. Wait, let them think they are winning. Let them get comfortable. When they make their move to discredit you, that is when you open it. I looked at Evan's name on the list again. I thought about the way he had kissed my forehead that morning. The way he had dismissed my fears as a mix-up. I thought about Brielle, texting me heart emojis while her name sat on a document designed to rob me. I felt a hardening in my chest. It was the death of the woman I used to be. The Emily who wanted peace was gone. The Emily who wanted truth had just taken her seat at the table. They are going to try to silence me, I said, realizing it as I spoke. That is why they are being so nice. They are watching me. Exactly, Noah said. So go home. Be the wife they expect. Let them think you bought the lie about the clerical error. Gather your own records, but keep this envelope safe. If you use it to end the war, not to start a battle. I gathered the papers. My hands were steady now. I slid the loose documents back into the large envelope, and then I took the small, sealed packet and placed it carefully in the zippered inner pocket of my purse. Thank you, Noah, I said. Good luck, Mrs. Ross, he said, lifting his coffee cup. I think you are going to need it. I walked out of the diner into the late afternoon sun. The world looked different than it had an hour ago. The colors were sharper. The noise of the traffic was louder. I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. I thought about driving to the police station. I thought about driving to Evan's office and screaming at him until the windows shattered, but I did not. I started the engine and drove home. I drove the speed limit. I used my turn signals. I was a model citizen. When I got home, the house was empty. I went straight to the guest bedroom closet, where I kept a small fireproof safe hidden behind a stack of winter coats. I opened it and placed the large envelope inside, right next to my birth certificate and my passport. But the small, sealed packet, I did not put that in the safe. I looked at it for a long moment, feeling the texture of the tape. Open only if you are cornered. I walked into my bedroom and placed the sealed packet in the bottom of my everyday purse. Burying it beneath the mundane clutter of my life, I wanted it close. I wanted to be able to touch it. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway, waiting for Evan to come home. I was not shaking anymore. I was not crying. I felt a strange, icy calm settling over me, like snow falling on a frozen lake. I would not open it unless they made me. But as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn that Evan claimed he paid for, I had a feeling that the time would come sooner than I thought. Come home, Evan, I whispered to the empty room. Come home and lie to me again. I was ready to listen, and I was ready to wait. The days following my meeting with Noah Whitaker were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Though my husband and his friends had no idea I was armed, they thought they were dealing with the old Emily, the one who internalized every critique, the one who apologized for taking up space. They did not know they were pushing a woman who was already holding the detonator. It started with small, surgical cuts. On Saturday night, we went to a dinner party at the home of one of Evan's potential investors. I was wearing a dress Evan had picked out, a pale blue silk that I found restricting. Midway through the appetizer course, I was telling a story about a renovation project where we discovered a hidden room behind a bookshelf. It was a good story, one that usually got a laugh. Actually, babe, Evan interrupted, placing a hand on my forearm. He squeezed just a little too hard. It wasn't a hidden room. It was just a crawl space. Let's not overdramatize it. You always love to embellish the details. He smiled at the table as he said it, a conspiratorial grin that invited everyone else to chuckle at his silly, exaggerating wife. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was big enough to stand in. Evan, I'd call that a room. Sure, honey, he said, patting my arm dismissively. Whatever you say. Anyway, as I was saying about the market volatility, he pivoted the conversation instantly, leaving me stranded in a silence that felt like a rebuke. Across the table, the other wives offered me sympathetic, pitying smiles. Poor Emily. Their eyes said, "She tries so hard to be interesting. It happened again at brunch on Sunday. I ordered the eggs Benedict." Evan laughed and told the waiter, "She'll actually have the egg white omelet. She's been complaining about feeling sluggish lately. Trying to watch the figure, right?" He did not ask me. He told me. And he did it with a tone of benevolent care, as if he were managing a child who could not be trusted to feed herself. I ate the omelet in silence, the taste like cardboard in my mouth. I watched him charm the waitress, watched him check his phone, and realized what he was doing. He was eroding my credibility. He was subtly painting a picture of me as unreliable, emotional, and in need of his guidance. If I sounded crazy later, people would remember these moments. Oh yes, Evan always said she was a bit unstable. Then came the digital siege. My phone buzzed incessantly. A group chat named The Inner Circle, created by Brielle, of course became a constant source of anxiety. It was just the four of us: Evan, myself, Brielle, and Miles. Brielle. So excited for the gathering next week. It's going to be perfect. Miles, looking forward to it. Evan, we'll be there. Emily is really looking forward to clearing the air. Brielle. Aw, love that. A little apology moment is good for the soul. Fresh start 3. I stared at the screen. A little apology moment. She made it sound like I had spilled red wine on a carpet, not like I was being coerced into admitting fault for a crime I didn't commit. The narrative they were spinning was specific. According to Brielle, I had embarrassed her at a charity gala 2 weeks prior. She claimed I had been loud, drunk, and made a snide comment about her family's money. The reality, I had sipped 1 glass of champagne all night. I had spent most of the evening standing by the wall while Brielle flirted with the bartenders. I hadn't said a word about her money. But history is written by the loudest voices, and Brielle had a megaphone. "I don't remember insulting her, Evan," I said to him on Monday evening. He was in his home office, tying a fly fishing lure, a hobby he picked up because his boss liked it. He didn't look up. "That's the problem. Emily, you don't remember. You get these moods. You say things, and then you block them out." Brielle was really hurt. She's been crying about it for days. "I didn't say anything," I insisted, keeping my voice calm, testing him. I was sober. I was quiet. Evan sighed, a long, weary sound that suggested he was the one suffering. He set down the lure and turned his chair to face me. "See, this is what Miles is talking about. You're defensive. Miles called me today. He's worried. He wants to keep the peace, but he says Brielle is devastated. He thinks, and honestly, I agree that you owe her this. Just a simple, 'I'm sorry.'" Is that so hard? Miles is involved in this. He's her husband, Evan said, his eyes narrowing slightly. He's trying to meditate. He's being a good friend, unlike you right now. "I see," I said, and I did see. Miles was the architect. I could hear his voice in Evan's words. Miles was the one framing this as a peacekeeping mission. Just apologize. Emily, make it go away. It was the logic of a settlement agreement. Admit no wrongdoing, but pay the price to make the problem disappear. Except the price here wasn't money. It was my dignity and my truth. "These people matter for our future, Emily," Evan added, his voice dropping to a serious, almost threatening register. "Miles is bringing me in on a deal that could set us up for life. I can't have you torching my network because of your pride. You need to fix this. For us." For us? The words twisted in my gut. There was no us. There was only them. The documents in my safe proved that. They were building a future. All right, a future funded by my credit, shielded by my liability, and enjoyed by them. I'll think about it, I lied. Don't think, Evan snapped, his mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Just do it. He turned back to his fishing lure, dismissing me. I walked out of the office, my heart pounding. I needed air. I walked to the back patio, sliding the glass door open quietly. The night air was cool. Smelling of pine needles and damp earth, I stood in the shadows, breathing deeply, trying to slow my pulse. That was when I heard the voice. Evan had followed me out. Or rather, he had come out a different door, the one leading from his office to the side deck. He was on the phone. He thought he was alone. I froze in the shadow of a large potted fern. She's resisting, Evan hissed into the phone. His voice was low, urgent. She's playing dumb. I'm pushing her, but she's acting weird, quiet. Pause. He was listening to the person on the other end. I know, Evan said, pacing back and forth. The gravel crunched under his loafers. But we need the public admission, if she apologizes in front of everyone. It validates the narrative that she's erratic. It covers the filing dates. If she claims she didn't know about the loan later, we can point to this and say she was having episodes, that she forgot things. My blood ran cold. They weren't just gaslighting me for sport. It was a legal strategy. They needed me to look mentally incompetent in front of witnesses so that if I ever challenged the fraudulent signatures, they could claim I had signed them during one of my episodes and then forgotten. They were building a case for my insanity to cover their felony. If she doesn't do it, we're exposed, Evan said, his voice trembling with genuine fear. The bank is already asking questions about the guarantor verification. We need this smokescreen. Miles, if she walks, the whole thing collapses. Miles. Of course he was talking to Miles. Yeah, Evan said. Yeah, I'll threaten the divorce again. That usually scares her. Okay, Tuesday, the dinner. I'll make sure she's there. He hung up. I heard the sliding door open and close as he went back inside. I stood there in the dark for a long time. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking with the sheer adrenaline of confirmation. Noah was right. It was coordinated. It was intentional. And they were terrified. They were building a stage for my execution. But they had forgotten one thing: the condemned woman gets a last request. I walked back inside. I went upstairs to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower to create white noise. I sat on the closed toilet lid and pulled out my phone. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I hadn't called in months. Cara Delaney. Cara was my college roommate. She was the opposite of Brielle. Cara didn't care about galas or designer handbags. Cara worked in logistics for a shipping company. She had a voice like a chainsaw and a heart made of Kevlar. She was the only person in my life who had ever looked at Evan and said, "He's too shiny. I don't trust him." I had distanced myself from her over the years because Evan didn't like her. He said she was abrasive. I realize now that abrasive was Evan's code word for observant. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I didn't know if she would even reply. I had been a bad friend, trading her loyalty for Evan's approval. I typed the message, "I need you with me. Tuesday night, 7 p.m., the Garner Estate. No questions. Just come." I hit send. I watched the 3 dots appear almost instantly. "Cara, send me the address. Do I need to bring a shovel or a lawyer?" I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Me. Just you. And maybe wear that blazer you have, the one that makes you look like a hitman." Cara, done. I'll be there at 6:45. I'm parking in the driveway. If anyone tries to tow me, I'll fight them. I put the phone down. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like someone who had just woken up from a long, suffocating coma. I would go to the dinner. I would stand in front of their friends. I would apologize, but I wouldn't be apologizing for what they thought. I went back into the bedroom. Evan was in bed, reading a magazine about luxury watches. He looked up, his face composing itself into that mask of long-suffering patience. You okay? He asked. You were in there a while. I'm fine, I said. Climbing into bed, I pulled the duvet up to my chin. I've been thinking about what you said, about the dinner. Evan lowered the magazine. And, you're right, I said, keeping my voice soft, submissive. I need to fix this. I'll apologize to Brielle on Tuesday. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Evan smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just closed a difficult sale. He reached over and patted my hand. That's my girl. You'll feel so much better once it's over. You'll see. It's for the best. Yes, I whispered, closing my eyes. It is. I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing even out as he fell asleep. I thought about the envelope in my purse. I thought about the dates on the timeline Noah had given me. I thought about the little apology moment Brielle was so excited for. They wanted a show fine. I would give them the performance of a lifetime. I wasn't going there as the defendant. I was going as the prosecutor. And when I opened my mouth, I wasn't going to ask for forgiveness. I was going to burn their house down, brick by brick, using the very lies they had handed me as the fuel. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Cara Delaney lived in a fourth-floor walk-up that smelled of roasted coffee beans and old books. It was a chaotic, vibrant space, cluttered with shipping manifests and half-finished watercolor paintings. It was the complete opposite of my sterile, beige house. And the moment I walked through her door on Saturday morning, I felt my shoulders drop 2 inches. I had not told her everything over the text. I had just asked for sanctuary. But as I laid the photocopies of the Harbor Line documents on her scratched wooden coffee table, along with the timeline Noah had given me, Cara did not gasp. She did not cry. She did not ask me if I was sure. She sat in her oversized armchair, wearing a faded band t-shirt, and read every single page in silence. She read with the intensity of a bomb defusal expert. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me. Her eyes were not filled with pity. They were filled with a terrifyingly cold resolve. Okay, she said. Her voice was steady. So, he is not just a cheater or a liar. He is a thief. And he is trying to leave you holding the bag for a few $1,000,000. That seems to be the summary, I said, sipping the mug of tea she had placed in my hand. It was lukewarm, but it grounded me. And this dinner on Tuesday, Cara continued, tapping her finger on the table. This is the trap. They want you to perform. They want you to look unstable in front of witnesses, so that when the debt hits the fan, they can say you were the one pulling the strings, or at least that you were too crazy to stop them. Evan said if I do not apologize, we are exposed, I replied. I heard him say it on the phone. Cara nodded, standing up to pace the small room. Right, so we are not going to let them expose you. We are going to let them expose themselves. But Emily, you cannot go in there emotional. If you cry, you lose. If you scream, you lose. If you throw a drink in Brielle's face, which, honestly, she deserves, you lose. You have to be boring. Boring. Boring, Cara repeated firmly. Boring is legally defensible. Boring is credible. Crazy women scream. Smart women present documentation. We need to treat this dinner like a board meeting. You are the CEO of your own life now. You are not there to defend your character. You are there to correct the minutes of the meeting. She grabbed a notepad and a pen. We need receipts, she said. Not the bank stuff. Noah has that. We need social proof. Brielle claims you embarrassed her at the charity gala 2 weeks ago. What time was that? It was on the 14th, I said. From 7 to 11 in the evening. Okay, check your texts. Check your photos. Did she text you after that date? I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I scrolled back. Yes, she texted me the next morning at 10:30. She sent a photo of us from the event with the caption, "Best night ever with my fav couple. Love you guys." Cara's smile was sharp. Perfect. You do not text your favorite couple if the wife just humiliated you. Screenshot it, print it, 3 copies. We spent the next 4 hours dissecting my digital life. We found a calendar invite from Miles sent 3 months ago for a strategy lunch that Evan had claimed was a dental appointment. We found Venmo transactions where Evan had paid Brielle for consulting on days he said he was at the gym. It was all small stuff, innocuous on its own. But when layered over Noah's timeline, it painted a picture of coordinated deceit. I left Kara's apartment with a binder. It was a slim, black binder, innocent-looking, but inside it contained the timeline of a conspiracy. "I will be there at 6:45 on Tuesday," Kara said as I stood at the door. "I will park in the driveway so they cannot block you in. I will stand by the door. If they try to separate you from the group, I will intervene. But the talking, that has to be you." "I know," I said. "I am ready." "You are," she agreed. "Stop trying to save the marriage. Emily, start trying to save the woman." On Monday morning, 24 hours before the dinner, I went back to see Noah Whitaker. I needed to understand the mechanics of the trap. I knew what they were doing, but I needed to know why the apology was the trigger. Noah was in his office this time, a small room stacked floor to ceiling with files. He looked at the binder I had assembled with a nod of approval. "This is good," he said. "This contradicts their social narrative, but you need to understand the legal mechanism they are trying to activate." He opened the Harbor Line Operating Agreement, the document I had seen before but not fully understood. He flipped to page 32, a section filled with dense legalese. "Here," Noah said, pointing to a clause titled Spousal Cooperation and Conduct. "I read this," I said. "It just looks like standard jargon." "It is not standard," Noah corrected. "It is a morality clause, essentially. It states that if a guarantor, that is you, by way of the forged signature, acts in a manner that is detrimental to the reputation or stability of the partnership, the managing members, Evan and Miles, have the right to trigger an immediate call on the loan liability, shifting 100% of the debt to the guarantor to protect the asset." I stared at the words. "Translate that for me." "It means," Noah said, leaning forward, "that if they can prove you are unstable, hostile, or damaging to the group's reputation, they can dump the entire debt onto you immediately to save the company. They do not just want you to apologize to smooth things over, they want you to admit on public record that you were out of line or not yourself. Once you admit fault in front of witnesses, they have the cause they need to trigger this clause. They will file for divorce the next day, and they will use your apology to saddle you with $4 million of debt while they keep the assets." The air went out of the room. It was so cold, so calculated. Evan didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to press me down so far I'd never stand back up. He wanted to use my own voice to seal the story over me. "So if I apologize," I said slowly, "I'm signing away my own chance to fight back." "If you apologize for their version of events." "Yes," Noah said. "But if you use that moment to correct the record, then you flip the script." "What can I legally say?" I asked. "I don't want to get sued for slander." "Truth is an absolute defense against slander," Noah said. "Don't call them names. Don't label them criminals. Don't say they lied. Just show the documents. Say, 'My name was signed here on this date. I wasn't there. Here is the proof.' Say, 'I didn't apply for this loan. Here is the report.' Stick to the facts. Facts are boring, but facts hold up." He glanced at the sealed packet Tessa Vale had left, one I'd brought with me. It sat on the edge of his desk. "And that," I asked, nodding to the packet, "that is your nuclear option," Noah said. "Tessa told me it contains the one thing that connects Miles directly to the fraud in a way he cannot talk his way out of. But if you open it, there is no going back. The police will get involved. Careers will end. Prison time will be on the table. Use the binder first. Give them a chance to back down. If they double down, if they attack you, then you open the packet." I took the packet and put it back in my purse. "I understand." "One more thing," Noah said as I stood up. "When you walk into that room tomorrow, do not drink, do not eat, keep a clear head, And remember, you are not asking them to believe you. You are informing them that you know. I drove home in silence. The house was quiet. Evan was late at work, or so he said. I knew he was likely with Miles, rehearsing their script for tomorrow. I went into my closet and looked at my clothes. Usually, for these dinners, I wore pastels. Soft pinks, baby blues, colors that made me look harmless, colors that Evan liked. I pushed those hangers aside. I pulled out a dress I had bought 3 years ago and never worn because Evan said it was too severe. It was a sheath dress, navy blue, almost black. It was tailored and sharp. It looked like armor. I hung it on the door. I spent the rest of the evening rehearsing. Not a conversation, but a presentation. I treated the upcoming dinner like a client pitch for a high-stakes design project. Step 1. The opening. Acknowledge the tension. Disarm them with compliance. Step 2. The pivot. Shift the context from emotion to fact. Step 3. The evidence. Present the documents. Step 4. The exit. I stood in front of the mirror, practicing my tone. It had to be soft but firm. No shaking. No tears. I had to channel the compliance officer who had called me from the bank, bored. Factual. Dangerous. I am sorry, Brielle, I practiced saying to my reflection. I am sorry you thought this would work. My phone buzzed on the vanity. It was a text from Evan. Evan, can't wait for tomorrow. It's going to be a great night. Love you. I looked at the words, love you. He typed them so easily. He probably typed them while sitting across from Miles, discussing how to ruin me. I did not reply. I turned off my phone. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight of anxiety was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They had built a table to eat me. They had set the silverware, poured the wine, and invited the audience. They expected me to sit down, bow my head, and let them carve me up. But they had forgotten to check if the main course was still alive. I was not begging for a seat at their table anymore. I was bringing a sledgehammer to smash it into firewood. I went to sleep that night and slept soundly for 8 hours. When I woke up on Tuesday morning, the sun was shining, and I felt nothing but a terrible, wonderful calm. It was showtime. The Garner estate was a sprawling monument to new money. All white marble columns and manicured hedges that looked too sharp to be real. It was the kind of house designed to intimidate, to make you feel like you should wipe your feet 3 times before stepping onto the foyer tile. We arrived at exactly 6:45 in the evening. As Evan pulled our car up the long, winding driveway, I saw Kara's beat-up sedan parked aggressively close to the front entrance. She had kept her word. Seeing that dented bumper among the lineup of pristine luxury SUVs gave me a jolt of courage that hit me harder than a double shot of espresso. "Why is that car here?" Evan muttered, frowning as he killed the engine. "Did the caterers park in the wrong spot?" "I think that is Kara's car," I said, my voice light and airy. "I invited her. I hope that is okay. I felt like I needed a friendly face tonight." Evan stiffened. He turned to me, his hand halfway to the door handle. "Kara. You invited Kara Delaney to a formal dinner at the Garner's Emily. She is rough around the edges. She does not fit in with this crowd." "She is my friend," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "And since I'm coming here to do something very difficult for you, I thought you would want me to be comfortable." I looked at him. I gave him the soft, pleading eyes he was used to. He hesitated. He was doing the math. He could send Kara away and risk me making a scene, or he could tolerate her presence to ensure the main event my apology went smoothly. "Fine," he sighed, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. "Just keep her away from the investors, and do not let her drink too much." We walked inside. The atmosphere was already thick, buzzing with the specific frequency of a high-stakes social gathering. There were about 30 or 40 people milling about the grand living room and the adjacent terrace. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and gossip. These were the power players of Raleigh. I recognized a local councilman. two developers Evan did business with, and the wives of the partners at Miles's law firm. Everyone was dressed in varying shades of charcoal, navy, and cream when we entered. Heads turned. It was not the casual glance of people greeting new arrivals. It was the hungry, unified turn of an audience watching the actors take the stage. They knew. Brielle had clearly done her prep work. They knew I was the unstable wife who had caused a scene, and they were waiting to see if I would crack again. Brielle was holding court near the grand piano. She wore a dress of shimmering silver that looked like chainmail made of diamonds. She held a flute of champagne, her posture perfect, her smile benevolent and tragic. Miles stood a few feet behind her, his hands in his pockets, watching the room with that reptile stillness. "There they are," Brielle called out. Her voice was musical, projecting just enough to silence the nearby conversations. "Emily, Evan, I am so glad you made it." She floated toward us. She did not hug me. She placed a hand on my forearm, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a restraint. "I was worried you might not feel up to it," she said, pitching her voice so the women standing nearby could hear. "I know how stressful things have been for you lately." "I am fine, Brielle," I said. "Thank you for hosting." "Of course, we just want everyone together. We want peace." She smiled, and her eyes flicked to Evan. It was a signal. "Is she ready?" Evan placed his hand on the small of my back, his fingers digging in slightly. "Emily is doing great. We are looking forward to a wonderful evening." I saw Kara standing by the French doors leading to the patio. She was wearing the black blazer I had requested, looking like a security detail for a head of state. She did not wave. She just locked eyes with me and gave a microscopic nod. Guardrail engaged. The next hour was an exercise in endurance. I accepted a glass of sparkling water and held it like a prop. I moved through the room, making small talk with people who looked at me with open curiosity. I could hear the whispers trailing in my wake. "Is that her? The one Evan was talking about? I heard she had a breakdown at the gala. Shame. Evan is such a good guy. He's trying so hard to support her." They were rewriting my biography in real time. Every nervous glance I cast, every silence I let hang too long, was being interpreted as a symptom of my instability. Evan stayed glued to my side, playing the role of the doting, concerned husband perfectly. He would fetch me a napkin. He would answer questions for me. "Emily is taking a break from big projects right now," he told a developer who asked about my work. "She needs to focus on her health." I smiled. I let him say it. I let him dig the hole so deep he would never be able to climb out of it. Finally, dinner was announced. We moved into the dining room, a cavernous space with a table that seemed to stretch for miles. I was seated intentionally. I was sure directly across from Brielle. Evan was to my right. Miles was at the head of the table. The meal was a blur of courses I did not taste. I checked my watch. 8:15. The chatter around the table was loud, fueled by the wine that had been flowing freely since 6 o'clock. Phones were out on the table, screens lighting up with notifications. Brielle was checking hers constantly. She was eager. When the dessert plates were cleared, the room grew strangely quiet. It was that lull that happens when everyone knows the main act is about to start. Evan pushed his chair back. The scraping sound echoed on the hardwood. He stood up. He tapped his spoon against his glass. Clink, clink, clink. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," Evan said. His voice was warm, charming, the voice of a man who owned the room. 30 faces turned toward him. "I know we are all here to enjoy a great meal," Evan began, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But there has been a bit of a cloud hanging over our little group lately. Misunderstandings happen. Stress gets to the best of us. And my wife, Emily." He paused, looking down at me with a sad, indulgent smile. "Emily has something she wants to say. She feels very strongly about clearing the air with our dear friend Brielle, so that we can all move forward with the love and support that defines this circle." He stepped back, gesturing for me to stand. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. He had framed it perfectly. I was the problem. He was the supportive spouse, and Brielle was the victim waiting for justice. If I stayed seated, I looked petulant. If I spoke, I admitted guilt. I stood up. My legs felt strong. My hands, resting on the edge of the table, were steady. I felt the cool leather of my purse against my ankle on the floor. "Thank you, Evan," I said. My voice was soft. I kept my eyes lowered for a second. Playing the part, Brielle straightened in her chair. She set her phone down. Screen up, recording. I could see the red dot out of the corner of my eye. She folded her hands in her lap, her expression one of gracious expectation. She was ready to accept my surrender. She was ready to forgive me, which would seal my fate as the erratic one who needed to be managed. "I know there has been a lot of talk lately," I said, lifting my head to look around the table. "And I know that many of you have heard stories about my behavior. Evan is right. It is important to clear the air. It is important to own our actions." Evan nodded encouragingly. "Go on," his eyes said. "Say the words." I turned to look directly at Brielle. "Brielle," I said, "I want to address what happened." "I am listening, Emily," she said softly. "We all are." "I was told that I needed to apologize to you tonight," I continued, keeping my tone level. "I was told that if I did not stand here and apologize for embarrassing you, there would be severe consequences for my marriage. So, I want to say this." I paused. The room was dead silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "I am sorry," I said. Brielle exhaled. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Evan relaxed beside me, his shoulders dropping. They had it. They had the soundbite. "But," I said, the word hung in the air like a gunshot. "Since we are doing honesty in public," I said, my voice hardening, shedding the soft, obedient timbre I had used seconds ago. "I think I need to correct the record on exactly what I am apologizing for." Evan's head snapped toward me. "Emily," I did not look at him. I reached down and picked up my purse. I placed it on the table. It was a breach of etiquette that made several guests flinch. I opened it and pulled out the black binder. "I am not apologizing for a scene at a gala," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "Because that scene never happened. I am apologizing for not paying closer attention to my own financial records." I opened the binder. "Evan," I said, "you introduced me as having something to say. I do. I would like to talk about Harborline Ventures." The color drained from Evan's face so fast, it looked like a magic trick, across the table. Miles went perfectly still. His hand, which had been reaching for his wine glass, froze in midair. "Emily, this is not the place," Evan hissed. Reaching for my arm, I stepped away from him, moving toward the center of the room. I held up a document. It was a certified copy, stamped with the official seal of the Register of Deeds. "This is a loan application for $250,000, I said, addressing the guests. "It was submitted last week to Sovereign Regional Bank. It lists me as the guarantor. It lists my social security number, and it bears a signature that claims to be mine." I dropped the paper onto the table in front of a woman named Sarah, the wife of the councilman. She looked down at it, startled. "The date on this application is November 14th, I said. "The timestamp is 3 o'clock in the afternoon." I pulled out a second document, a large, glossy photograph. "On November 14th, from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, I was on a site visit in Charleston, South Carolina, for the Peterson renovation. Here is the geolocation data from my phone. Here is the time-stamped receipt from the gas station where I filled up my car 300 miles away from where this document was signed." I looked at Evan. His smile was gone. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like a man who had walked into a room expecting a birthday party and found a firing squad. "Emily, stop," Miles said. His voice was low, authoritative. "You are making a scene. You are confused." "I am not confused, Miles," I said, turning to him. "And I am not finished." I pulled out the next page. "I visited the records office. I found a lien on my home. a lien connected to Harborline Ventures. I had never heard of this company, so I did some digging. I found the operating agreement. I looked at Brielle. She was no longer poised. She was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. The smugness had evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. "The managing partner is Evan Ross," I said. "The secretary is Miles Garner." I let that sink in. The guests were exchanging looks. The phones that had been out to record my humiliation were now recording the unraveling of their hosts. "And the beneficiary," I said, looking straight into Brielle's eyes, "is Brielle Garner." A gasp rippled through the room. "I was told I had to apologize to keep the peace," I said. "I was told I was unstable. I was told I was embarrassing the family. But looking at these dates, and looking at these signatures, I realized something." I walked back to the table and placed the binder down in front of Evan. He stared at it as if it were radioactive. "You did not want an apology because I hurt Brielle's feelings," I said, my voice calm, professional, like I was explaining a zoning violation to a difficult client. "You wanted an apology because you needed to establish a record of my incompetence. You needed witnesses to believe I was crazy so that when this fraud came to light, you could blame it on me." "That is a lie," Evan sputtered, but his voice cracked. He looked around the room, desperate for an ally. "She is off her meds. She does not know what she is saying." "I am not on any medication, Evan," I said. "But I do have the notary logs." I pointed to Kara. She stepped forward from the doorway. Holding up a second binder, she did not speak. She just held it up, a silent sentinel of truth. "The notary who supposedly witnessed my signature on the loan application," I asked. "Her name is Tessa Vale. She passed away 6 months ago." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. "You used a dead woman's stamp to forge my name," I said. "And then you dragged me here, in front of all your friends, and threatened me with divorce if I did not help you cover it up." Evan looked at Miles. Miles looked at the table. Brielle looked at the floor. I picked up my glass of water. My throat was dry. "So," I said, turning back to Brielle. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with fake tears this time. She was terrified. She saw her social standing, her reputation, and her future crumbling into dust in real time. "So yes, Brielle," I said softly, "I am sorry." I paused one last time. "I am sorry you thought I would stay confused." I set the glass down. I did not storm out. I did not flip the table. I just stood there, in the wreckage of their carefully constructed lie, and waited for someone to try and tell me I was wrong. No one moved. The silence that followed my statement about Tessa Vale was not the polite, awkward silence of a dinner party gone wrong. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom when a smoking gun is placed on the witness stand. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with sudden, collective realization. I did not let the moment pass. I did not give them time to recover. I had opened the door, and now I was going to walk them through the house of cards they had built, room by room. "You seem quiet, Evan," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Usually, you have an explanation for everything. But I suppose it is hard to explain how a woman who has been buried for 6 months managed to drive to downtown Raleigh last week and notarize a commercial loan document." I reached into the binder again. I moved with deliberate slowness. I wanted them to see my hands. I wanted them to see that I was not shaking. "Let us look at the specifics," I said, pulling out a spreadsheet that Kara and I had color-coded. I held it up so the guests nearest to me could see the rows of data. "This is a breakdown of the loan application submitted to Sovereign Regional Bank. It is for a line of credit totaling $250,000. I heard a low whistle from the end of the table. It was one of the developers. He knew what that kind of money meant. "The loan is secured against 2 things, I continued, pacing slowly along the length of the table. "First, the equity in the home I share with Evan, and second, my personal future earnings as a guarantor." I stopped behind Miles's chair. He did not turn to look at me. His neck was stiff, the muscles tight. "But here is the interesting part," I said. "I never signed this application. I never spoke to a loan officer. I never authorized anyone to use my name. In the state of North Carolina, obtaining a loan by falsely representing the identity of a guarantor is a Class H felony. It is also federal wire fraud." I saw the woman named Sarah, the councilman's wife, slowly lower her phone. She had been recording the apology to share with her friends. Now, she was staring at Evan with a look of pure horror. She wasn't recording gossip anymore. She was recording evidence. She tapped the screen to stop the video, but she didn't put the phone away. She set it on the table, face up, listening. Evan stood up abruptly. His chair screeching against the floor made everyone jump. "That is enough," he shouted. His face was flushed, a stark contrast to the pale shock of moments before. "This is a private financial matter. Emily, we are not doing this here. You are clearly confused about the corporate structure. We will discuss this at home." He reached for the binder on the table. Trying to close it, I slammed my hand down on top of the open pages. The sound was sharp, violent in its suddenness. "No," I said. I looked him dead in the eye. "You do not get to call for privacy now. Evan, you brought these people here. You demanded an audience. You told me that if I did not apologize in front of everyone, you would leave me. You wanted a public performance." I gestured to the room, to the stunned faces of his business partners and social climbers. "Well, here it is. You wanted this public, so we are going to finish it in public," Evan faltered. He looked at the guests, trying to find a sympathetic face. "She is hysterical," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "She does not understand how business loans work. I have power of attorney." "You do not," I interrupted. "I revoked your limited power of attorney 3 days ago. Noah Whitaker filed the paperwork on Monday morning, but even if you had it, power of attorney does not allow you to forge a signature and backdate it with a dead notary's stamp." Miles cleared his throat. He stood up slowly, smoothing the front of his jacket. He was trying to regain control of the room, trying to use his lawyer voice to lower the temperature. "Emily," Miles said, his tone dripping with condescending patience, "let's all take a breath. I think I can clarify this. The document you are holding was likely a draft. Sometimes, in complex filings, we prepare paperwork in anticipation of a signature. It is a placeholder. It was never meant to be processed without your final review. This is just a misunderstanding of the procedural timeline." He smiled at the room, a tight, confident smile. "You know how it is. Paperwork gets messy. Emily found a draft and panicked. It is understandable." It was a good lie. It was smooth. It almost worked. I saw a few shoulders relax. "A draft," I repeated. "Exactly," Miles said, nodding. "Just a draft." I picked up my phone. I scrolled to a screenshot I had taken from Miles's own social media, cross-referenced with a text message he had sent to Evan. "That is an interesting theory, Miles," I said. "But if it was just a draft, why did you text Evan on November 15th at 9:42 in the morning saying, and I quote, I held the phone up, reading from the screen. "The loan is approved. Funds hit the account on Thursday. Make sure she stays clueless until the transfer clears." Miles froze. His smile did not fade. It just curdled, turning into a grimace. "I have the screenshot," I said, "and I have the bank confirmation. The funds did not just hit a draft folder. Miles, they hit the Harborline Ventures account on Thursday. $250,000 of real money, secured by my fake signature." I turned to the guests. "Does that sound like a placeholder to anyone here?" No one answered. The room was deathly quiet. The developer who had whistled earlier was now frowning deeply, looking from Evan to Miles with a look of calculation. He was wondering, I was sure, if his own contracts with them were clean. Brielle suddenly stood up. She looked frantic, her eyes darting around the room. Realizing she was losing the audience, "This is ridiculous," she cried out, her voice shrill. "You are ruining dinner. You are just jealous. Emily, you have always been jealous of us. You are trying to make this about money because you cannot handle the fact that you were awful to me. You are deflecting. Am I? I asked. I turned the page in the binder. Let's talk about why we are here. Brielle, let's talk about this apology you needed so badly. I looked at Evan. He was leaning against the sideboard, looking like he was about to be sick. I asked myself for days, I said, addressing the room again. Why force a public apology for a gala incident that never happened? Why threaten divorce over something so petty? Evan is a narcissist. Sure, but he is also a strategist. He does not blow up a marriage over a rude comment. I picked up the copy of the Harbor Line operating agreement. It is because of this, I said, tapping the paper. Section 14, paragraph 3, the spousal cooperation clause. I read the text aloud, my voice steady and clear. If the guarantor demonstrates a pattern of public instability, reputational damage, or lack of cooperation that endangers the partnership's standing, the managing members, that is Evan and Miles, reserve the right to accelerate the debt liability and transfer 100% of the financial obligation to the guarantor to protect the primary asset. I looked up. Do you understand what that means? I saw the councilman's wife nod slowly. She understood. It means, I said, that they needed proof. They needed a room full of witnesses to see me admit that I was unstable. They needed me to say, I am sorry. I was out of line. I was not myself. If I had said those words tonight, by tomorrow morning, Miles would have filed a motion claiming that my erratic behavior was a risk to the business. I took a step toward Evan. You would have used my apology to trigger that clause, I said. You would have dumped $4 million of projected debt onto me, filed for divorce, and walked away with the assets while I drowned in bankruptcy. That is why you needed the audience. You were not looking for forgiveness. Evan, you were looking for a scapegoat. Evan wiped his mouth with his hand. He looked small. The bravado was gone. The charm was gone. He looked like exactly what he was, a thief in a tailored suit. You cannot prove that, he whispered. It was a weak defense. That is speculation. Is it? I asked. This was it, the final card. The one Noah had helped me find. The one that turned this from a financial dispute into a premeditated dismantling of a life. I reached into the back pocket of the binder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was an invoice. You told me on Monday, I said, that if I did not apologize, you would file for divorce. You acted like it was a decision you made in the heat of the moment, driven by my bad behavior. I held up the invoice. This is a billing statement from the law firm of Chatterton and Wise. They are divorce attorneys, very expensive ones. I walked over to Evan and held the paper up to his face. Look at the date. Evan. He stared at it. He did not blink. The consultation took place on October 12th. I read aloud. 6 weeks ago. That is 4 weeks before the loan was applied for. That is 5 weeks before the alleged incident at the gala with Brielle. I turned to the room. He drafted the divorce petition 6 weeks ago, I said. He hired the lawyer before the loan was even submitted. The plan was never to stay married. The plan was to use my credit to fund his new business. Frame me as crazy to shift the debt, and then divorce me once the money was secure. I looked at Brielle. She had sunk back into her chair. She looked pale, stripped of her power. She knew that everyone in the room now saw her not as the victim, but as the accomplice. I looked at Miles. He was staring at the table, his jaw working. He was already calculating his defense, figuring out who he could throw under the bus. He would probably turn on Evan before the night was over. And finally, I looked at Evan. He was looking at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. He had spent 10 years thinking he was smarter than me. He had spent 10 years thinking I was just the quiet, supportive wife who would sign whatever he put in front of her. He had mistaken my kindness for blindness. You were never going to stay, I said softly, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a shout. You told me you were threatening divorce to punish me for hurting Brielle. You made me feel like I had destroyed our marriage. I closed the binder. The snap of the rings closing was the final period on his sentence. "But you were not threatening divorce to punish me," I said. "You were threatening divorce to protect yourself." I left the binder on the table, right next to his wine glass. "And now," I said, "you are going to need a much better lawyer." The silence I had created was heavy, but it was fragile. I knew that people like Brielle Garner did not go down quietly. They did not look at evidence and admit defeat. They looked at evidence and saw an attack on their reality that had to be destroyed. Brielle stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor, toppling backward with a crash that made two guests jump. Her face, usually a mask of carefully applied bronzer and effortless joy, was twisted into something unrecognizable. It was not just anger, it was the feral panic of an animal realizing the cage door has been locked. "You are unhinged," she spat, her voice rising to a shriek that cracked the polished atmosphere of the dining room. She pointed a manicured finger at me, her hand shaking. "Look at you. You come into my house, you disrupt my dinner, and you throw around these delusions. You are jealous. Emily, you have always been jealous. You are jealous because Evan is successful, and you are just a decorator. You are jealous because Miles and I have a real partnership, and you are just clinging to a man who is clearly exhausted by your drama." She looked around the room, her eyes wide and pleading. "She is having a breakdown. Can you not see it? She concocted this whole conspiracy because she cannot handle the fact that she is failing. She is obsessed with me. She is trying to destroy us because she is miserable." It was a good performance. If I had been the old Emily, the one who cried when people raised their voices, the one who doubted her own memory, I might have crumbled. I might have looked at the shocked faces of the guests and wondered if she was right. But I was not that Emily anymore. I was the Emily who had read the files. I waited for her to finish. I waited for her breath to hitch. "Jealousy is an interesting theory. Brielle," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade through silk. "But jealousy does not forge notarized signatures, and jealousy does not file shell company documents under false names." I reached into the binder again. This was the moment Noah had warned me about. This was the moment where I stopped defending myself and started dismantling their history. "You called me delusional," I said, "but I think the person struggling with identity is you, because when I looked into the filing history of Harborline Ventures, I found something very strange. The initial reservation for the LLC name was not made by Brielle Garner. It was made 3 years ago by a woman named Brielle Sterling. I held up a document. It was a photocopy of an old Articles of Incorporation filing from a neighboring county. "Brielle Sterling," I repeated, letting the name hang in the air. At the far end of the table, a man named Robert, who owned a chain of car dealerships, suddenly stopped drinking his wine. He set his glass down with a sharp clink. He squinted at Brielle, his brow furrowing. "Sterling?" Robert asked, his voice rough. "Wait a minute. Brielle Sterling. From the interior design startup in Charlotte. The one that dissolved 5 years ago after the vendor deposits went missing." The color drained from Brielle's face so completely she looked like a wax figure. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "That is the one," I said to Robert, nodding. "It seems Brielle has a habit of starting ventures that end with missing money and new last names. Harborline is just the latest iteration. The only difference is that this time, she needed a fresh credit profile to leverage. She needed someone with a clean history and significant assets. She needed me." The room erupted into whispers. The tension spiked from awkwardness to genuine danger. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This was a revelation of a pattern. The guests were pulling back from the table, physically distancing themselves from Brielle and Miles. Miles stood up abruptly. He was sweating now. The calm, reptile-like detachment was gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a lawyer who knows he has lost the jury. "That is enough," Miles shouted, holding up both hands. "Everyone, please, this is a private matter. There are legal misunderstandings here that need to be cleared up in a proper forum. Not over dinner. I am asking you all to please respect our privacy. We need to end this evening. Now. Privacy? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You did not want privacy when you invited 40 people here to watch me apologize. You did not want privacy when you planned to destroy my reputation to trigger a liability clause. You only want privacy now because the truth is ugly. Emily, please, Miles begged. His voice cracked. It was a sound I had never heard from him. Weakness. We can discuss this. We can work something out. Just put the papers away. He was begging. Miles Garner, the man who looked at everyone like they were insects, was begging me to stop. That was more confirmation of guilt than any signed confession could ever be. Evan moved then. He had been watching the exchange with a look of dawning horror, his eyes darting between Robert, Miles, and me. He realized the ship was sinking, and Evan, true to his nature, decided to switch sides before the water hit his chin. He walked around the table toward me. He softened his posture. He put on his best "I am a good guy" face. He reached out a hand, trying to touch my shoulder. He said softly. His voice was thick with fake emotion. Baby, look at me. Okay, you made your point. You are right. Things got complicated. Maybe Miles and I made some bad calls with the paperwork. We were under pressure, but we can fix this. We can go home, just you and me. And we can sort this out. I can remove your name from the loan tomorrow. I promise. We do not need to do this in front of everyone. He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that had worked on me for 10 years. He thought he could charm his way out of a felony. He thought he could gaslight me one last time, turn this into a we problem instead of a he crime. I looked at his hand hovering near my shoulder. I did not flinch. I just looked at it until he dropped it, awkward and rejected. We can fix this, I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, Evan said eagerly, nodding. We can fix it. I love you. We are a team. We can survive this. You did not want to fix it yesterday, I said. Yesterday, you were threatening to divorce me if I did not help you commit fraud. Yesterday, you were telling your friends I was crazy. I took a step closer to him, forcing him to look me in the eye. You only want to fix what became visible, I said. You are not sorry you did it, Evan. You are sorry I found the receipts. That is not true, he protested. But his eyes were darting around the room, checking to see if anyone bought his act. No one did. Kara stepped forward from the doorway. She had been silent until now, a dark sentinel in the corner. She walked up to the table and stood next to me. She did not look at Evan. She looked at the guests. Just so everyone is clear, Kara said, her voice booming in the quiet room. This is not theater. This is not a marital spat. The documents Emily showed you, the forged signature, the fake loan application, the divorce retainer, copies of all of them were delivered to the State Attorney General's office and the Fraud Division of Sovereign Regional Bank at 4 o'clock this afternoon. A collective gasp went through the room. This is documentation, Kara said, looking at Miles. The investigation has already started. Tonight was just a courtesy notification. Brielle let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. You went to the police, you bitch. You ruined everything. Do you know who we are? Do you know who Miles knows? You will never work in this town again. I will make sure you are blacklisted from every design firm in North Carolina. I turned to Brielle. She was trembling, her face blotchy and red. You can try, I said calmly, but I think you are going to be too busy testifying to worry about my career. I turned back to the binder. I had one last card to play, one last twist that would shatter the final alliance in the room. Evan, I said. He looked at me, looking defeated. What more do you want? Emily, you have humiliated me. I am not doing this to humiliate you, I said. I am doing this to save you from being the only one who goes to jail. He frowned. What are you talking about? You think Miles is your partner, I said. You think you two are in this together. You think that if Harborline goes down, you go down together. I flipped to the last tab in the binder. I read the fine print of the operating agreement. Evan, the section Miles wrote. The section you probably signed without reading because you trusted him. I pulled out the page and held it up. Section 22, Designated Liability Member. I read. In the event of legal dissolution, regulatory inquiry, or debt default, the managing member, Evan Ross, assumes sole personal liability for all outstanding obligations and legal discrepancies, indemnifying the Secretary Miles Garner from all claims. I handed the paper to Evan. He set you up. Evan, I said. Miles structured the company so that if the fraud was discovered, you would be the one to take the fall. He is the secretary. You are the managing member. He gets the money if it works. You get the handcuffs if it fails. Evan stared at the paper. His hands started to shake. He read the paragraph, his lips moving silently. Then he looked up at Miles. The look on Miles's face confirmed everything. He was not looking at Evan with concern. He was looking at him with cold, dead eyes. He knew he had been caught. You. Evan's voice was a whisper. You told me that clause was standard. You said it was just boilerplate language to protect the firm. It is business. Evan, Miles said coldly, buttoning his jacket. Grow up. Evan looked like he had been punched in the gut. The realization washed over him the double betrayal. He had betrayed me for Miles, and Miles had been planning to sacrifice him all along. The room was silent. The guests were looking at the three of them, Brielle the con artist, Miles the architect, and Evan the patsy, with a mixture of disgust and fascination. I closed the binder. I picked up my purse. Evan looked at me. There were tears in his eyes now. Real ones. Tears of a man who realized he was entirely alone. Emily, he said, his voice breaking. I did not know. I swear I did not know he wrote that. It does not matter, I said. I looked at him, and I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was just the clarity of the end. You built a whole life on the idea that I was stupid, I said. You thought I would never check the papers. You thought I would never fight back. You thought I was just an accessory to your ambition. I took a step back, flanked by Kara. You did not build a marriage with me, Evan, I said, delivering the words that I knew would haunt him long after I walked out the door. You built an exit plan. I turned around. Let's go. Kara? We walked out of the dining room, past the stunned guests, past the marble columns, and out into the cool night air. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could hear the sound of their world collapsing behind me, and for the first time in months, the silence outside felt like freedom. The dinner party did not end with a bang. It ended with the scurrying sound of rats fleeing a sinking ship. As Kara and I walked toward the heavy oak front door, I could hear the immediate aftermath of my departure. It was not shouting. It was the frantic, hushed rustle of 40 people trying to retrieve their coats at the same time. The spell of the Garner estate, the illusion of their untouchable perfection had been broken. And now the guests just wanted to distance themselves from the blast radius. The night air outside was sharp and cold. It filled my lungs, stinging in a good way, like antiseptic on a wound. I walked straight toward Kara's car, my heels clicking on the pavement with a steady, unhurried rhythm. Emily, wait. The voice came from behind me. It was desperate, breathless, and pathetic. I did not stop, but I slowed down. I turned around just as I reached the passenger door. Evan was jogging down the driveway. He had left his jacket inside. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. And his hair, usually so perfectly coiffed, was falling into his eyes. He looked younger and smaller than I had ever seen him. He skidded to a halt a few feet away from me. He reached out a hand, but he did not dare to touch me. Kara stepped forward, crossing her arms, effectively becoming a human wall between us. Please, Evan panted, his chest heaving. Please, do not leave like this. You have to come back inside. We can smooth this over. We can tell them it was a misunderstanding. If we leave now, it looks like an admission of guilt. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 10 years. I looked at the man who had kissed me goodbye in the mornings and then gone to work to draft a plan to bankrupt me. It looks like an admission of guilt because it is one. Evan, I said. My voice was not loud. It was exhausted. You are destroying us, he said, his voice cracking. Do you realize what you just did? You just torched my reputation. You torched Miles. You torched everything we built. Why would you do this? He was crying now. Tears were streaming down his face. But even in his tears, he was the victim. He was the one suffering. He did not see me. He never had. I am not doing anything, I said. I opened the car door. The interior light flooded the driveway, casting long shadows. I am just letting the consequences arrive, I told him. You ordered them. I just signed for the delivery. I got into the car. Kara slammed the door shut, cutting off whatever he was going to say next. As we drove away, I watched him in the side mirror. He was standing alone in the driveway, bathed in the red glow of our taillights. A man who had built a castle on a sinkhole and was surprised when the ground opened up. The next 72 hours were not dramatic. They were administrative. Real revenge is not about explosions or speeches. Real revenge, I discovered, is about paperwork. It is about the quiet, boring, meticulous work of reclaiming your own existence. I did not go back to the house on Oakwood Drive. I stayed with Kara. I slept on her pull-out sofa, surrounded by her half-finished paintings. I woke up the next morning not with a hangover, but with a clarity that was almost frightening. I took the day off work officially this time and spent 6 hours in Noah Whitaker's office. We did not celebrate. We worked. We filed a formal fraud affidavit with the police. We sent cease and desist letters to Harborline Ventures. We contacted the credit bureaus to freeze my reports with a level of security usually reserved for government witnesses. This is the hard part, Noah warned me, peering over his reading glasses. The adrenaline is gone. Now comes the silence. And the silence is where they will try to get to you. He was right. By Wednesday afternoon, the silence was broken by my phone. It was Evan. He did not call. He knew better than to call Kara's number, and I had blocked him on mine. He sent emails, dozens of them. I sat at Kara's kitchen table and read them. They were a fascinating case study in narcissism. Subject: Please talk to me. M. I am staying at a hotel. Miles kicked me out of the office. He is blaming me for everything. You have to help me. I am your husband. Subject update. I spoke to a lawyer. He says if you drop the fraud claim, we can settle this civilly. We can keep the house. Please, Emily, I am scared. I do not want to go to jail. Subject: why I gave you everything. I gave you a life most women would kill for. Why are you being so cruel? There was not a single line asking how I was, not one sentence acknowledging the betrayal. It was all about his fear, his discomfort, his loss. I did not reply. I forwarded every single email to Noah and hit delete. On Thursday, the bribe arrived. It came in the form of a courier package delivered to Kara's apartment. Inside was a formal letter from a high-end crisis management firm representing Miles Garner. The letter was smooth, polite, and legally vague. It offered a mutual release of claims. In exchange for my silence and the retraction of my statement regarding the notary, Miles was prepared to offer a settlement of $500,000. Paid into a trust of my choice. $500,000. It was a lot of money. It was enough to start over. It was enough to buy a small house and never think about them again. Kara looked at the letter, then at me. He is scared, she said. He is trying to buy the leak before it sinks the boat. He thinks I am for sale, I said. He thinks everyone is for sale because he is. I took a pen and wrote a single word across the front of the letter, declined. I put it back in the envelope and handed it to the courier who was still waiting in the hallway. Take this back, I said. Do you want to sign for refusal? He asked. No, I said. Just tell Mr. Garner that he cannot afford me. While Evans spiraled and Miles tried to negotiate, Brielle was undergoing a different kind of collapse. Raleigh is a small city disguised as a big one. The social circles are tight, and news travels faster than light. The dinner party had been attended by 40 people. By Wednesday morning, 400 people knew what had happened. I did not have to lift a finger. The guests did the work for me. I heard from a colleague at work, a junior designer who followed the social scene, that Brielle had been removed from the host committee for the winter gala. It was a small thing, petty in the grand scheme of things, but for Brielle, it was a death sentence. Then came the silence from her squad, the women who appeared in her daily selfies. The ones who commented Queen and goals on her posts, they vanished. Her Instagram feed, usually a barrage of curated perfection, went dark. I saw a photo taken by a local blogger on Friday. It showed Brielle sitting alone at a cafe where she usually held court. She was wearing sunglasses and a hat, hunched over her phone. No one was sitting with her. No one was looking at her. She had built her power on the perception of exclusivity. I had shown everyone that her exclusivity was funded by theft. The illusion evaporated, and with it, her influence. I felt a strange lack of satisfaction. I thought I would feel triumphant watching her fall. Instead, I just felt a distant pity. She was a hollow shell of a person, and now that I had cracked the shell, there was nothing left but air. I turned my focus inward. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Aris immediately. Noah had recommended her. She was a stern, older woman who did not offer tissues when I cried. She offered perspective. "You are waiting for the other shoe to drop," she told me during our second session. "You are hyper-vigilant. You think that because you won the battle, the war is going to escalate." "Will it not?" I asked. "Evan is desperate. Miles is powerful. They are powerless against a woman who does not want anything from them." "Doctor," Aris said, "that is your superpower. Emily, you do not want their money. You do not want their apology. You do not want their reconciliation. You just want out. There is no leverage against someone who has already walked away." I leaned on my real support system. Kara was my anchor. She made sure I ate. She made sure I slept. She screened my calls. She was the family I had chosen, infinitely more valuable than the one I had married into. And my work. I went back to the studio on Monday. I walked in, expecting whispers, expecting judgment. Instead, my boss, a woman named Sarah, capable of spotting a crooked seam from 50 yards, called me into her office. "I heard rumors," she said, looking at me over her glasses. "About legal trouble, identity theft." "Yes," I said, bracing myself. "I am handling it. It will not affect my work." "I do not care about the rumors," she said. "I care that you are the best lead on the Peterson account. Do you need time? Do you need an advance on your salary for legal fees?" I blinked, surprised by the sudden lump in my throat. "I might need some flexibility for meetings." "Take it," she said. "We protect our own here. Now go pick a tile for the master bath. The client hates the beige." It was a small moment, but it grounded me. I was not just Evan's victim. I was Emily Ross, a talented designer, a valued employee, a woman with a life that existed outside the blast radius of her marriage. On Sunday night, 1 week after the dinner, I sat down at Kara's desk to write the document that would define my future. Noah had asked for a list of non-negotiables for the separation agreement. He wanted to know what I was willing to trade. I took a fresh sheet of paper. I thought about Evan's pleading eyes. I thought about Miles's settlement offer. I thought about Brielle's silence. I wrote at the top of the page, the boundary list, Item 1. No direct contact. All communication must go through counsel. I will not read his emails. I will not listen to his voicemails. If he wants to speak to me, he can pay Noah to listen to it first. Item 2. No non-disclosure agreement. I will not sign away my right to speak the truth. I will not be bought. If they want to settle the financial fraud, they can do it. But I will never sign a document that forces me to lie about what happened. Item 3. Full financial severance. I want my name off the loans. I want my credit restored. I do not want alimony. I do not want a piece of his future earnings. I want a clean break. I want to be able to look at a bank statement and know that every cent in it is mine. Item 4. No emotional negotiations. I will not attend mediation sessions designed to closure. I will not listen to apologies. The time for apologies was before he signed my name to a felony. I put the pen down. I looked at the list. It was short. It was simple. But it was the most powerful thing I had ever written. For 10 years, I had been a woman who could be managed. I could be talked into things. I could be guilted into silence. I could be maneuvered into a corner. I picked up the paper and folded it. The real victory wasn't that I had exposed them. It wasn't that I had humiliated Brielle or outsmarted Miles. The real victory was that I was sitting here, in a cluttered apartment, drinking cheap tea, with less money in my bank account than I had a month ago, and I felt completely, terrifyingly invincible. I was no longer controllable, and that, I realized, was the one thing they would never be able to forgive. "Kara," I called out. "Yeah," she answered from the kitchen. "Do you have a stamp?" I asked. "I have something I need to mail to Noah." "Top drawer," she yelled back. "You good?" I looked at the envelope. I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, the smile reached my eyes. "Yeah," I said. "I am really good." It had been 6 weeks since the dinner party that dismantled my social life, and I was finally sitting in the room where I would dismantle my marriage. The mediation center was located in a glass-walled high-rise downtown, a neutral ground that smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. The conference room was vast, dominated by a mahogany table long enough to land a small plane on. On one side sat Evan, Miles, and their phalanx of attorneys. On the other side sat Noah Whitaker and me. Evan looked good. That was the first thing I noticed. He was wearing his lucky navy suit, the one he wore when he was closing a deal. His hair was perfect. He offered me a small, sad smile as I walked in. The kind of smile that was meant to say, "I forgive you for your outburst." He still thought this was a negotiation. He still thought charm was a currency that had value in this room. Miles was less composed. He looked thinner, his eyes darting around the room, checking the exits. He was a lawyer. He knew the difference between a skirmish and a war, but even he seemed to believe they could contain the damage. The mediator, a retired judge with a voice like sandpaper, cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss the separation of assets and the dissolution of the marriage between Evan and Emily Ross," he said. "We are also here to address the civil complaints regarding the entity known as Harborline Ventures. I understand there is a proposal on the table." Evan's lead attorney, a man with a comb-over and a condescending manner, leaned forward. "Yes, Your Honor, my client, Mr. Ross, is prepared to be generous. Despite the public embarrassment Mrs. Ross caused, he is willing to offer a settlement of $300,000. Provided she signs a non-disclosure agreement regarding the business filings and retracts her statements to the police, we believe this is a fair compromise to keep family matters private." Evan nodded at me, his eyes soft. "I just want you to be okay. I want us to move on without anyone else getting hurt." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had tried to gaslight me into insanity. He truly believed he was the hero of this story. He believed that by offering me a fraction of what he had tried to steal, he was doing me a favor. I did not speak. I reached into my tote bag. Noah watched me, his face impassive. He knew what was coming. I pulled out the sealed packet. It was the same packet Noah had given me in the diner. The brown paper was crinkled now, worn from the weeks I had carried it around, waiting for this exact moment. The tape was still unbroken. The note from Tessa Vale, "Open only if you are cornered," was still visible on the front. "What is that?" Miles asked, his voice sharp. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the reason I am not signing your NDA." I placed the packet on the table. "This is an insurance policy left to me by Tessa Vale, the notary whose stamp you stole," I said. "Noah Whitaker delivered it to me weeks ago. I have not opened it. I wanted to give you a chance to tell the truth today, but since you are still trying to buy my silence, I think it is time we hear what Tessa had to say. I picked up a letter opener from the center of the table. The sound of the paper tearing was the loudest thing in the room. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten transcript. I handed the transcript to the mediator. I plugged the USB drive into the laptop connected to the room's speaker system. Tessa Vale suspected she was being used, Noah explained to the room. So, the last time Evan Ross and Miles Garner came to her office to try and pressure her into notarizing a document without Emily present. She turned on her dictaphone. She kept the recording in a safe deposit box. Evan's face went gray. Miles stood up, his chair tipping over. "You cannot play that," Miles shouted. "That is an illegal recording two-party consent laws in North Carolina require." "Actually," Noah interrupted, "North Carolina is a one-party consent state, and since the recording took place in Tessa's office, where she had a posted sign stating premises were under surveillance, it is fully admissible. Sit down, Miles." I pressed play. The audio was grainy at first, filled with the static of a room tone. Then, a voice cut through. It was Evan. Evan recording. "Come on, Tessa, just stamp the damn thing. Emily is sick. She can't come in." Tessa recording. "I cannot notarize a signature I did not witness. Evan, you know the rules." Miles recording. "The rules are flexible. Look, we need this loan structure. If we don't get the funding by November, the whole Harborline deal collapses." Evan recording. "She is going to be a problem. She is asking questions about the credit inquiries." Then came the part that sucked the oxygen out of the room. It was Miles's voice, clear and cold. Miles recording. "Then we accelerate the plan. We need to discredit her. Brielle has an idea. We stage a social fallout. Get Emily to apologize for something public. Make her look erratic. Once she is on record as unstable, we trigger the liability clause." Evan recording. "And then what?" Divorce. Miles recording. "Exactly. You file for divorce the next day, citing irreconcilable differences due to her mental state. We dump the debt on her side of the ledger, keep the assets in the LLC, and you walk away clean. She will be too broke to fight it." Evan recording. A pause. "It feels harsh." Miles recording. "Do you want to be rich, or do you want to be married to a decorator? Make a choice." Evan recording. "Fine. Let's do it. I will make her apologize at the dinner." I pressed stop. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I looked at Evan. He was staring at the table, his hands trembling violently. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his lawyer, who was slowly closing his file folder. "Counsel," the mediator said, his voice icy, "it appears your client has not been entirely forthcoming with you regarding the intent of his actions." Evan's lawyer stood up. He looked at Evan with undisguised disgust. "I need a recess," he said, "and I need to speak with my client about the penalties for perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud." "There will be no recess," Noah said firmly. "We are finishing this now." The negotiation that followed was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. The confidence Evan had walked in with was gone. The leverage Miles thought he had was incinerated. The recording proved intent. It proved conspiracy. It proved that the emotional abuse, the gaslighting, and the public humiliation were all premeditated steps in a financial crime. "Here are the terms," I said. I did not wait for Noah. I spoke for myself. "I want a full release from all liability regarding Harborline Ventures. I want the deed to the house transferred to my name solely, effective immediately. I want a lump sum payment of half the value of Evan's current retirement accounts, and I want a written confession, signed by both Evan and Miles, admitting to the forgery, which I will keep in a safe deposit box and only release if you ever come near me again." That is everything he has," Evan's lawyer stammered. "No," I said. "That is the cost of doing business." Miles was slumped in his chair. He knew his career was over. The recording implicated him in conspiracy. He would be disbarred. The moment he walked out of this room, he would be fighting to stay out of prison. And Brielle, the recording had implicated her too. Brielle has an idea. She wasn't just a beneficiary. She was the architect of the social destruction. She was the one who suggested the humiliation. I looked at Evan. He raised his head. His eyes were red, rimmed with the exhaustion of a man who realizes there is no exit. "Emily," he whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just got in over my head. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, and I felt absolutely nothing. The love I had held for 10 years, the loyalty I had guarded so fiercely, it was all gone, burned away by the truth on that tape. "Stop lying, Evan," I said. I leaned across the table. "You meant to use me," I told him. Hurt was just the cost. He flinched as if I had slapped him. The paperwork was drawn up within the hour. There was no more fight in them. Evan signed the papers with a shaking hand. Miles signed them with a look of pure hatred. Not for me, but for Evan, for getting caught. When it was over, I stood up. I put the transcript back in my bag. I left the USB drive on the table. "You can keep that," I said. "I have copies." I walked out of the conference room. I walked past the reception desk. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunshine of a Tuesday afternoon. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the noise of the city wash over me. Cars honking, people talking, the wind rustling the trees. It sounded like music. I took a deep breath. I was 33 years old. I was divorced. I had a house that needed a new roof and a heart that needed to heal. But for the first time in a decade, I owned my own name. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had one text message. It was from Kara. "Kara, did you burn it down?" I typed back. "Me to the ground." I put the phone away and started walking. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I was walking away from the person I used to be. I was no longer the wife who kept the peace. I was no longer the woman who apologized for taking up space. I stopped auditioning for love that day. I chose myself. And as I merged into the crowd, just another face in the city, I realized that was the only victory that really mattered. If someone demands an apology to keep the peace, ask yourself, peace for who? Because sometimes, the only way to find real peace is to go to war. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was the hardest journey of my life, but I'm stronger for it. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. I love reading them and seeing how far this story travels. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to Kate Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong and trust your gut.